So this video is how to give a 2NC and 1NR, which are the speeches which are also known as the block. Obviously these are the two negative speeches in the middle of the debate, and they're back-to-back. So you can think of them a little bit differently than you might think of the other speeches. The block is basically like one big speech that's given by two people. So one big priority in the block is not to repeat arguments between the 2NC and the 1NR. Instead you want to do, and this is the first important thing about the block, is split the block. And what that means is just the 2NC and the 1NR should be talking about different arguments in each of their speeches. The easiest way to do this is to take a disadvantage that you read in the 1NC and have that be either what the 2NC talks about or what the 1NR talks about. And then have the rest of your arguments from the 1NC and have that be what the other speaker talks about. So for example, if in your 1NC the affirmative was an offshore wind affirmative, and you said, first of all, we're going to read this economy disadvantage, offshore wind is bad for the economy. Secondly, we're going to say that offshore wind is not as good as they say it is, offshore wind doesn't stop global warming, maybe global warming isn't real, maybe a couple other arguments about why offshore wind wouldn't be successful. You could split the block so that the 2NC just talks about the environment disadvantage, and the 1NR just talks about why offshore wind wouldn't work or wouldn't be successful. And that makes sure that you're using that time as efficiently as possible, and you're not repeating yourself in a way that's maybe not too helpful in terms of winning the debate. The other stuff that you do in the block is actually very similar to what you do in the 2AC. So just like in the 2AC, your two other priorities are to explain your arguments and to answer the other team's arguments. So just as at the beginning of the 2AC, you might want to sort of explain again why your affirmative is a good idea, the basic idea behind it. At the top of the 2NC, when you're talking about maybe your disadvantage, you want to re-explain the disadvantage again and just make sure that the judge understands why is it that offshore wind would hurt the economy, why is the economy so important, and what is it that you sort of do to resolve some of these problems. The second thing you want to do is answer their arguments. So they might make a lot of arguments about why the disadvantage isn't true, and just like the 2AC needs to address the other team's arguments, you also need to address the other team's arguments. And again, this really just comes down to a large extent to flowing and note-taking so you know exactly what the other team said. The last portion of this, again, just like the 2AC, is making sure that you have blocks. So once you sort of know, you've had a couple of debates and you have sort of a sense for what the affirmative is likely to say in response to your arguments, you can start thinking about how do I answer what the affirmative is likely to say. This ends up being pretty advanced. You're now talking about blocks for speeches pretty far along in the debate, trying to anticipate what the other team will say in response to your arguments. These are pretty advanced questions, but I think if you're willing to put in the time and a little bit of effort, you can think about what the affirmative is going to say and answer it in advance. So again, check out the video on writing blocks if you want more information on doing that. So again, 3 parts of the 2NC, split the block, take different arguments between you and your partner, explain your arguments, and answer the other team's arguments.